We are in week 4 of our series, Love, Sex, and Dating, and we've traveled a little bit in this series. In week 1, we talked about thirst traps and bitter wells, how often our souls long for something that God doesn't really want for us, right? And so we looked at a story, and we saw that Jesus said that I am the living water, and if you will drink from me, you will never thirst again, that Jesus is the answer for all of our heart's desires and everything that we need in this life. And then the week after that, we looked at this guy named Esau and some of the cravings that he had, and he made an impulsive decision that had consequence for the rest of his life. In fact, he traded his birthright for a bowl of stew. And we talked about how sometimes when we make those same types of impulsive decisions, it can be costly, and it can really affect our lives. And so we want to make sure that we're using wisdom and discernment. But we also talked about if we've made some of those decisions, that God can redeem it, God can restore, God can heal. There's forgiveness and freedom in Him. And then last week, Pastor Luke did an amazing job last week? Come on now. He's like, He talked about the things we carry into our relationships. Because how many know when you get into a relationship, you're not just like bringing in, the relationship that you have, but you're bringing all the baggage and all the stuff in your life and all the things and all the trauma. But we also talked about how there's no shame in all that stuff, but there is healing, there is forgiveness, there is freedom. But God has a great plan for us in the confines of marriage. And so today, though, I want to share a message entitled "Worth Fighting For." And I'm going to speak to the married couples, but I want you to know this applies to all of us here today. But I do believe there are some things worth fighting for. But how many know, if you've been married, that there are things that you fight for that probably are not worth fighting for, right? That you fight about. And so you go toe to toe. It's not like it's theological or moral. It's not even all that important. You just fight about stupid stuff. Like, I will give you one. Like how to fold the clothes. Listen, I have been married. It'll be 24 years in June. And I will still give Carol's folded clothes to her, and she will give me the look that says, this is not the right way, all right? I am very aware after 23 years, I still don't know how to do it right. She was very gracious, very kind, but I know that I don't know what the right way is. Maybe by the day I die, I'll learn. Probably not. She's given up. She's resigned. That's it. Or some of you, it's like loading the dishwasher. Now, we are on the same page on this. We have strategy, all right? We go in and we look, we see what dishes are in the sink, right? And then you come up with a game plan to load the dishwasher. Our children, however, they do not have that same plan. They say if it fits, it must sit. And they just put stuff in there, and I'm like, that's never going to get washed. What were you thinking? And they're like, we weren't. All right? Or how about this one, the toilet paper? Come on now. We got people going under. We got people going over. We got people who just enjoy pure chaos. You don't even put it on the roll. You just put it on the tank behind the toilet, right? I don't even know how you live your life. By the way, the right answer is over. Can we get an amen on that? Yeah, it is over. That is the right answer, and you can fight me about it later on. But these are the battles that we face sometimes, right? In marriage, we argue over stupid stuff. And now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but married people, we can get very passionate about these same stupid things. Like, I can't tell you how many times I sat down with a couple and I'd be like, hey, where did this all start? And they're like, I don't even know. It wasn't even important. But which brings me to a story of a game that we play in our family called Ticket to Ride. Now, I don't know if you've ever played this game, but I'll kind of summarize it. It's very simple. If you've never played it, the goal is simple. It's to build a train from one city, so you have a map of the U.S., from one city to another, and you get these like destination cards. And so you have to choose. The longer the train, the more points you get, but the more likely you're to be stopped, right? Somebody's going to block you. You're not going to have the route that you want. And so you have to kind of weigh that risk in your head, whether or not you think it's worth it. But if the train does not make it all the way from one destination to the other, you get no points, all right? So it ruins everything. Now, here's the important part. Carol, my wife, she is very good at this game. And I know she was just standing up here, and she's looking all sweet and smiley and kind and cute. Trust me, she's a competitor, and the claws can come out, all right? She is in it to win it. And so she's very focused when she's playing. She's very strategic. She's very patient, all right? And she doesn't really trash talk. Now, my daughter's sitting right next to her, Dina. She is the biggest trash talker of all time. She inherited that from her father, right? But Carol does not trash talk because, what she tries to do? She tries to fly under the radar. Like, she's over there building her nice little train, and she's got all this, like, almost inevitably, almost always, she has the longest train because she just kind of, but here's the thing. I'm also strategic, and I also like to win. And so I make it my life's objective sometimes to block her from getting from one point to the other point. I just think that that's good strategy. She does not always agree with me. So she will bat her eyes at me and be like, oh, babe, you don't want to block me. And then if that doesn't work, she will give me the death stare, like laser through your soul. Guys, if you ever received that stare from your spouse, all right, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And she will give that to me, and she's like, you better think about what you're about to do, because there's going to be consequences to this later on if you go through with this move. And so then I do think about it. And then I very gently, I very kindly, I very rationally, all words that I would use to describe myself, very lovingly explain to her the whole point of the game is to win. To win the game. And so in order to win, I have to stop her. Now, here's the bottom line. We're both playing games. We're playing the same game. And we're both trying to build something. We're both trying to reach a destination. But at some point, I think in life and in games sometimes even, it stops feeling like we're building something, and it starts feeling like we're actually fighting each other. And if we're not careful, a game that was supposed to be fun can turn into something personal. Now, don't worry. We still play. We still get along, and it's always good. Mostly, as long as she wins and she gets her way. I'm just kidding. I'm much more of a sore loser. I used to be the guy. Listen, your pastor's grown. I used to throw boards if I would lose. I was kind of a sore sport, okay? But God's working on me. Some of you are like, I need to judge you, and that's fair. You see, marriage can be a battle. And because we are also in marriage, we're trying to build something, right? We're trying to make these connections. But sometimes we have different plans, different strategies, different ideas. But God wants to create a life for us together. But if we're not careful, we can stop fighting for the relationship, and we can start fighting in the relationship. We can start fighting each other. And today I want to talk about what is actually worth fighting for. Some of you are like, I'm a lover, I'm not a fighter. Listen, there are some things in your life that you need to fight for. There are things that are worth fighting for. Listen, not every argument, it's true, not every argument is worth fighting about. Not every argument is worth trying to win. Not every irritation is worth escalating. Not every difference is worth defending. But when it comes to your marriage, when it comes to your unity, when it comes to connection and intimacy in your future, those things are worth fighting for. To find out how we can do that, I want to look at the book of Exodus, chapter 17. And we see Israel, who are the people of God. They are in a very real battle with a very real enemy. God has delivered Israel from Egypt. So we talked about this in week 1, they spent 400 plus years in slavery at the hand of the Egyptians, and God led them miraculously out of that slavery, led them through the Red Sea. They crossed on dry ground, and then the Red Sea swallowed up their enemies, the Egyptians, as they chased after them, and now they're free. But the reality is they are not slaves anymore, but they are also not settled. Because God has a promised land for them, but they haven't reached that destination. So they're in this in-between season. And this is where the enemy attacks. And I think this happens to us a lot of times as well. On the heels of God doing something great, the enemy will come and try and steal that victory away. And this is the first military battle that Israel faces after freedom. They didn't go looking for it. This battle very much came to them. And I want to read verses 8 through 13 in Exodus 17 here this morning. It says, Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, Choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. So Amalek's a neighboring group of people there. And it says, Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua, who is Moses' protege, he does what he tells him, and he fought with Amalek while Moses and Aaron and Hur, Aaron is Moses' brother, Hur is one of the military entrusted leaders with Moses, they went up to the top of the hill. When Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But whenever he lowered his hands, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary. So they took a stone, and they put it under him so he could sit. And while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, as long as his hands were steady they'd steadied it until the going down of the sun. And then Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword, and they won the battle. Would you pray with me? Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you that it can teach us in every season, in every stage of life. And Lord, I pray today that it would produce life in such an incredible and powerful way. And I pray that you would encourage your people, God, that they would know and experience your love and your grace and your peace. God, I pray for marriages here in this house, God, that you would restore and you would work, and God, that you would have your way in me and in all of us today. In your name, amen. So if you remember back in week 1, of this series, we see how Israel was walking into freedom. But on the other side, as we just mentioned a moment ago, they started to complain and grumble. Remember, they were like, we don't have any water. And so they start to grumble. They go run to some bitter water, and they're like, okay, now we want this, and there was this kind of turmoil inside the camp. But seemingly this has resolved itself at least to a degree, and now they kind of fortified against a common enemy who's come to attack them. Verse 8 says, then Amalek came and fought with Israel. Can I tell you that sometimes there are going to be battles that we have to face because they're of our own creation. But sometimes we're going to face battles just because we're living through life. The enemy's going to come our way, and we got to be ready when those battles come. The enemy brought the battle to them, and thankfully they were able to turn their attention to them, because that was the very first thing we see in this story, that they have to fight the right enemy. And I want to encourage you today to fight the right enemy. Don't get caught up in fighting with one another. If you forget who the enemy is, what happens is you'll start fighting your allies. You'll start fighting the people that you're meant to actually be fighting for. And here we have Joshua, who is in the valley, but Moses is on a hill. So they're in two different places, yet different roles, but the same mission, different positions, but the same purpose. And this is often how it works in a relationship. We're not going to always be doing the same thing, but we're on the same team. We're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to accomplish God's work in our lives. And marriage works this way. You're not fighting your spouse. You're not fighting your boyfriend or your girlfriend. You're not fighting their personality or all their little weird quirks like I have. And thank God for my wife. She's so patient with me. You can ask her about chapstick later on, and she will tell you all about it. I'm not going to get into it right now, but I have a problem. Anyway. But I don't know why I said that. Sometimes things just come out, guys. However, sometimes we are fighting some very real things, though, right? We're fighting stress. That's real. That's part of life. We're fighting exhaustion or temptation. We're fighting insecurity. We're fighting comparison, or maybe we're fighting drift. We seem like we're pulling apart, or maybe even our relationship with God is pulling apart. And we have to remember who we're actually fighting. Ephesians 6:12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. In other words, the real enemies we face are not one another. So often we think that the other person is our enemy, but that is not what the Bible tells us. But here's what happens in our relationships. We start building our life together. Things are going good. We're building a life. We're building a future, a home. There's a connection there. But then pressure hits. Man, the bills, they start to pile up. The schedules, they start to collide. The kids melt down. Intimacy feels off. You get tired. And instead of standing shoulder to shoulder, you stand face to face. You start turning against the person, rather than inviting God into the equation. And now it feels like the battle is between you and them, and it can happen really, really quick when we start to take on and carry weight. How many have ever moved a couch with somebody? Anybody? You ever moved a couch with somebody? One of my sons was in here, Josiah, the first service, and I feel like I've moved a lot of couches with Josiah. He's the one that I always end up moving it with. And here's what happens. Like, you pick up the couch, and you didn't really game plan it. Right? And so it's a big couch, it's a heavy couch, and you're holding this weight. And how many know when you're holding weights, like your patience isn't what it normally is? The tone of voice isn't always like as good as it should be. And so you're going and you get to the door and you're trying to get through the doorway, and all of a sudden you can't fit. And so you're like, hey, you need to tilt it this way. And they're like, hey, I am tilting it this way. And you're like, no, you're not. And they're like, yes, I am. And they're like, well, you need to push. And well, that's because you're not pulling. And you start going back and forth with each other. And somehow the couch becomes less the problem, and the person becomes the problem. But how many know the couch didn't change? The doorway didn't move. The goal didn't even change. But because you're not aligned, you lose sight of the goal, and you don't accomplish what you're trying to do. But if both of you would just step back for a few moments, come up with a game plan, talk it out, figure out how we're going to move it, look at things a little bit closer, then that problem would probably get solved. And this is marriage. See, the doorway is stress. The couch is the pressure. But if you turn on each other, you'll exhaust yourselves before you ever get through. Before you ever see God do the things that you want God to see God do in your life, you will argue with one another. You'll say, well, you're not pulling your weight. You're not doing this thing. How come you're not doing that? Well, I'm doing this. And you will start to make it us versus them. Imagine if the Israelites had just started yelling at Moses because he let his arms down. Joshua's down there leading the people, and he's in battle, and he looks up at the hill, and Moses starts to let his hands down. Like, they're winning the battle when his arms are up. How many know when things are good, like, there's never any problems? Like, we're good, God. Like, everything's going well. I'm making good money. I got a good job. Family life's good. But the moment something changes, that's when the real character is seen in our lives. But could you imagine Joshua looking up at Moses and be like, what are you doing, bro? Raise up your hands. We're down here on the battlefield. We're losing. Come on, can't you suck it up, man? Just do your job. Or could you imagine Aaron and Hur, who are up there with Moses? They're like, looks like you need to hit shoulder day a little bit harder, man. Like, can't keep those hands up anymore. I thought you were the tough guy, like you were the leader. Can you imagine them mocking them? They would have never won the victory if they'd taken that approach. They would have destroyed the entire plan. But how many know sometimes in marriage, in relationships, friendships even, instead of cheering one another on, we nitpick every little detail, every little thing that somebody does wrong. And we look at them and we say, why couldn't you do it this way? Or why didn't you do that? Or why didn't you think about this? Instead of trying to realize that we're on the same team and we're supposed to be helping each other, we start to tear one another down. And if Israel had done that, they would have lost. And I will tell you, if you do that in your relationships, you will lose too. So let me ask you, when the tensions rise in your relationship, who are you aiming at? Or when you're stressed or you're tired or overwhelmed, who absorbs all of that? Because if you fight each other long enough, you know what happens is the real enemy, Satan, he wins without even picking up the sword, and he loves it. Before the next argument escalates, what if we just pause to stop and ask, am I fighting on the same team with this person instead of against this person? Because what you are building is worth protecting. It is worth fighting for, and you cannot protect it if you are constantly attacking each other daily. Now, even when you are fighting the right enemy, though, even when you know that you're in it together, you're on the same team, there is another battle that I just referenced here with Moses. And that battle happens a little bit more subtly, and it happens usually over time, and that is fatigue. We talked about identifying the right enemy, but now let's talk about identifying the real threat. Because we need to know that sometimes there's a very real threat within ourselves. Like, we are human. We have limits. The Bible often talks about the devil in the way the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But do you know the Bible also talks a lot about this thing called the flesh? Because we are flesh and blood, right? We are just people. And we have our own selfish desires, our own selfish wants, our own selfish needs. And so we bring that into the equation as well. And so we got to identify when that's happening, we can say, that's what's going on, and I'm going to yield my life to Jesus. Because let's read verses 11 and 12. It says, whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary. I do want to point out something here about this. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say that Moses stopped believing all of a sudden. It doesn't say that Moses quit on his people. It doesn't say that Moses got distracted. It just says that Moses got tired because he's human. And the battle started shifting. See, the real threat in this story wasn't just Amalek, it was exhaustion. Because exhaustion can change outcomes. It can make us do things we would not normally do. Let me say it this way. Most marriages don't fall apart because of one dramatic explosion. It is a sequence of events. They erode because of accumulated exhaustion, fatigue. You get tired. You get tired of initiating, tired of apologizing first, tired of carrying the emotional weight, tired of having the same conversation over and over and over again, tired of trying to constantly feel close. And when you get tired, your hands lower. Now, I'm going to use a little bit of an illustration here. I'm going to have my wife help me. We are not going to box right now. That is not actually what we're going to do. And you were going to say, Pastor Ray, are you a boxer? You're about to see, no, I'm not. All right? But let me give you a little bit of a picture here so you can kind of see. When you go to box, here's the thing. A lot of times we want to box because what do we want to do? We just want to hit something. Like, that's good. That's fun, all right? We just want to punch stuff. But if you're really going to become a boxer, you got to learn not just to punch, you got to learn how to defend yourself. And what any trainer will tell you is you got to keep your hands up. Because why? You got to protect your face. You got to protect your chin. If you drop your hands, all that happens, all of a sudden you're vulnerable. And so often this happens in our life. Because you're going through the boxing rounds, right? And the later the match goes, the more you're boxing, the more punches you've thrown, the longer it goes, all of a sudden what happens? Those shoulders, they start to burn. And just almost reflexively, without even thinking about it, what do? You start to drop your hands. And now what happens? You are susceptible to attack. You've made yourself vulnerable. That's why we need trainers in our corners who say, hey, hands up, because we might think we are. Like I always watch myself preach, and I think, man, I smile so much. And then I watch myself, I'm like, I look angry, all right? I got problems. We don't always see things, and we need other people to help us point it out. Otherwise we're gonna drop our guard. And all of a sudden, this is when the enemy comes to take you out, man. This is when all sorts of just different sinful options, they start to sound a little bit more appealing. Like maybe they could satisfy. Thank you. Isn't she great? Marriage, this is what happens in marriage sometimes. See, Moses' hands dropped and the enemy gained ground. Sometimes when we're fatigued, we're exhausted. You know what happens? We stop communicating clearly. We start assuming things instead of actually asking questions, being a little bit more curious. We withdraw from one another instead of engaging with one another. We avoid hard conversations because I just don't have the capacity to do it one more time. And this is where drift starts. It doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with just being tired. You stop praying together. You stop checking in with one another. You stop talking about money. Stop having honest conversations about sex. Can I just tell you, I have sat with a lot of couples over the years, a lot. And I am amazed how many times they're just going through life and they just don't talk about stuff. And a lot of people say, what's the number one thing that breaks up marriages? And I'll be like, oh, money. No. You know what it is? It's unsaid and therefore unmet expectations. They bring expectations into the relationship, and because they don't speak them, because they don't communicate them, the relationship falls apart because they're putting a weight on somebody that they don't even know that's upon them. And so we're trying to get people to read our minds, and it just doesn't work that way. And we got to be careful because otherwise we'll become cynical because we'll think, well, people don't care. That's why the Bible says in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Keep your hands up. Another version says, keep your heart with all vigilance, meaning you got to keep doing it. You don't just do it once and it's all good. You got to do this every single day. God, I bring my life to you. God, I bring my relationship to you. I bring my marriage to you, God, and I want to honor you in it. See, that type of guarding, though, it requires energy and focus and attention. But if you're fatigued constantly, your guard is going to drop. And when your guard drops, lies start to sound like solutions. Like porn will help me feel better. An affair will help fix all my loneliness. More money will make me secure. A different person will understand me better. So how do we overcome these lies? I'm going to tell you it's actually not by avoiding all fatigue. Now, there is a level of exhaustion that I think we need to put up rails in our life, that we say yes to the things that God has called us to and no to those things, because sometimes we say yes to it and we're just simply overwhelmed. We are overstimulated. We got too much going on. Yes, that is true. But the truth is, life just sometimes is hard. Sometimes you get sick. Something happens, an unforeseen circumstance, and that's tiring and it's fatiguing. You can't avoid all of that. So how do we actually overcome it? By understanding where our source of hope and strength actually come from. Psalm 61:2 says, when my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. The Bible says that God's ways are higher than ours. His ways are not our ways, meaning that we need wisdom and discernment from Him. We need to be able to rely on Him. Isaiah 48:31, for those who hope in the Lord, renew their strength. But you know how you get to hope? Through suffering. Romans tells us that suffering produces perseverance. And perseverance builds our character. And character will lead us to hope, and a hope that does not disappoint. If you want to find a hope that actually strengthens you, it's going to mean you're going to have to go through some stuff, and you're going to have to trust God through it all. Psalm 73:26, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart, my portion forever. He is enough. If you think you have the capacity to do it, can I just tell you? I want to rain on your parade, but you don't. You need Jesus. You don't have to have all the answers. I hope that actually takes some pressure off you. You won't have to have endless strength because Jesus does. He meets us in our fatigue, in our frustration, in our vulnerability, and in our weakness. But I want you to know that the way God often strengthens us is through others. And this is why the next part of this story is so important. Because Moses didn't win this battle by himself. And we all need to find the right support. We need people in our corner who will tell us our hands are down. Listen, if my hands are falling down, I don't want somebody to just say, good job, Ray. Hope you don't get knocked out. I want somebody to say, hey, get your hands up. You're doing something stupid. You're going to get hurt. I want people who actually care about me, not just care about making sure they don't hurt my feelings. Exodus 17:12, Moses' hands grew weary. So they took a stone and they put it under him and he sat on it. While Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Can I tell you, Moses didn't win this battle by being strong. He won it by being supported. Let me say it again. He did not win this battle by being strong. He won it by being supported. Some of you are in this house, and I'm speaking to you right now. You think, I got to be stronger. No, you don't. You got to let somebody help you. He didn't pretend that he wasn't tired. Moses didn't grit his teeth and say, oh, I'm fine. I got it. Don't worry about me. He sat down when they gave him the option to be able to sit. He let people get close enough to actually steady his arms when he could no longer hold them up. Do you have anyone in your life that you let close enough to actually support you? And this is where I've seen many couples fall apart. Not because they don't love each other, but because someone in the relationship, or maybe even both of them, refused to admit that they needed support, refused to open up, refused to ask for help, refused in their mind to look weak. Can I get in your business here for a moment? And I'm going to do it either way, so you don't really have to answer that question. It's a little bit rhetorical. Some of you in this house aren't just overwhelmed, you're stubborn. Let me say it again. Some of you go around, you say, oh, I'm overwhelmed, No, you're not. You're stubborn. You won't let people help you. You convince yourself that letting someone hold up your arms means that you have somehow failed. You think that asking for help is some sort of sign of weakness. You think that counseling is for other people, they got issues, but I'm good. I can figure it out. You think that vulnerability is optional. Like, I'm not going to talk about my feelings and all that stuff. You think that honesty is somehow dangerous or that strength looks like independence. And I know this can apply to everybody in the house, including all of you women, but can I just talk to you men for a moment here today? Men, can you stop sitting there and telling yourself that you're doing everything you can because you work hard and you bring home a good income and that's really what your wife and your kids need? No, it's not. You know what they need? They need you first and foremost. They need you to help lead. To be more direct, they need you as a man of God. It doesn't mean you have to have a theological degree or have all the answers, but they do need you to be willing to surrender your pride and your ego so that God can work in you and through you so that you can be the man of God that He's called you to be. I wish that the men in the church would rise up because for a lot of years, I'll be honest, the women have carried it. But guys, we have a role to play, and God has given us an awesome responsibility and privilege. And I'm praying and believing that we would be a church where the men of God seek after Jesus, where we lead the way in worship, that we don't wait, but we lead the way. I preach messages like this, and you know who always comes up to me afterward? It's all the ladies. Every single time. Like, man, you preach that more. Listen, if you still think that getting help is a sign of weakness, may I remind you that the strongest person in this story that we talked about today, in the entire nation, in this account, is Moses. He's the man who's confronted Pharaoh. He's the man who saw the Red Sea part, the man who held the staff of God. This is the man, though, that needed help. And if Moses needed support, how crazy is it to make us maybe think that we don't? Stubbornness doesn't make you strong. You know what it does do? It makes you isolated. You know what stubbornness is compared to in the Bible? It says stubbornness is like the sin of witchcraft. How wild is that statement? That's how dangerous stubbornness is in our lives. Pride does not protect you. It drains you. It's going to make you fall. Silence doesn't shield you. It's going to suffocate you. Keeping everything inside doesn't prove how strong you are or how mature you are. It proves that you're afraid to give God everything. Unless you think I'm speaking at you, please know that I'm speaking very much to myself today. If there's a sermon that I could ever hold up a mirror and say, you need to hear this, this is the one, because I struggle with it. Because there are parts of my own story, painful parts, that I didn't even understand until later in life. And listen, I'm about to say something, and I want you to know I love my family very, very much. They are fantastic, my growing up, my parents and everything. They're incredible people, and they love me very much. But I'll be honest with you, growing up, it was a little bit chaotic. Because there's some painful parts of my story that I didn't really even understand until years later. In my house, there was almost always plenty of yelling. I know I seem like a quiet guy, so it's probably shocking. There was fighting, there was abuse, infidelity, divorce, addiction. In fact, when I was very, very young, an extended member of my family sexually abused me. And I honestly didn't really even remember that moment until much later in life. I learned by talking to a counselor that sometimes our coping mechanism is just to kind of block it out. It's something that happens to us. But what I will tell you is that because of my life experiences, I didn't really have a very good understanding of what a healthy, God-honoring marriage looked like. So when we got married, man, I love Carol. Head over heels in love with her, madly in love with her even today. And I am so thankful that it's deepened over the years. I have a better understanding of what real love is. And I loved her all the way through the entire marriage. But you know, when you're first married, you kind of have this honeymoon phase, they say, right? And everything seems good, and everything's good. And, you know, it's got the feeling and the emotions, and it's all great. But then things happen in life. Just the inevitable path of life. Hardships come, trials come, difficulties you face. And when those came, it revealed that I was not very healthy, and our marriage subsequently was not very healthy. I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't really even think, if I'm being honest, that I needed to communicate, because I was really that ignorant. I was like, well, she just needs to figure it out. I thought counseling was for other people. I was one of those people. Yeah, they need counseling because they got a lot of issues going on, certainly. But I'll get it together. I lived in my little world of denial, but inwardly I knew something was wrong. I didn't know how much the events in my life had shaped my approach to intimacy, to connection, to communication, to vulnerability. Even today, a lot of you might just process through your feelings really well. That is a lot of work for me. I have to be really hyper-intentional to think about that. Like not just what am I feeling, but why am I feeling this way? And for a long time, for a lot of years, I didn't talk about it. In fact, I didn't even know how to talk about it until I sat down with a counselor, until I got around some other people who loved me enough and just sat down with me, and they were patient and they helped me. But healing didn't happen, and this is a point I want you to see, healing didn't happen until I stopped trying to carry things on my own. Strength didn't come until I stopped hiding. Freedom didn't come until I let trusted people walk with me, pray with me, and help lift me when I couldn't lift myself. And that's exactly what Moses shows us here. Strength today, please hear me, strength is not the absence of weakness. That is such a shallow understanding of strength. Strength is realizing that we have weakness, but we're willing to admit it. Strength is letting people get close enough to actually help us, to be honest and to be raw and real with certain people. In fact, it's even biblical. Galatians 6:2, carry one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Some of you today, you're in the house, and man, you're great at helping carry other people's burdens. You'll pray for them, you'll believe with them, you'll sit with them, you'll talk to them, you'll counsel them. But when it comes to you letting somebody else help you, that's a different story. Well, I don't want to be a burden to them. Well, the Bible says you should. You should let them help carry that. Not become codependent on them. We go first and foremost to God, but then we come to others. We go to counselors. We go to pastors. We go to friends and family members who love God, and we get the help that we need. There are burdens today that you are not meant to carry privately, battles that you are not meant to fight silently, wounds that you are not meant to heal from all by yourself. Who in your life today, let me ask you, who in your life really knows you? Like really knows when you're getting tired, who can see the signs and do something to support you? Who knows you, the patterns of your life when you're drifting away from God? Who knows what the things that maybe you're afraid to say or is willing to ask the questions that need to be asked? Who knows the places where you've been hurt, the expectations that you buried, or the baggage that you haven't processed yet? Do you have people in your life that know those things? Because we all need them, every single one of us. So stop believing the lie that it will magically fix itself. It'll just work itself out. Yes, we need Jesus, but God gave us people in our life to help us as well. Because Moses had divine authority, but he also needed human support. Both matter. You don't win by yourself. You don't heal by yourself. You don't grow by yourself. We're starting our small group season here today officially. And one of the we try to make in our groups is that do life alone, that we're better together. Ecclesiastes says if one person falls, how sad it is if they fall and they have no one else there to help pick them up. But if there's two of you, then they can help to pick you up. And bring God into the equation, then something supernatural begins to happen. See, the way that you're going to win, the way that you're going to heal, the way that you're going to grow here today is by stop pretending that you can hold your arms up forever and let somebody come alongside you and actually help you. You need the right people in your life to support you. So here's the invitation today. Stop fighting the wrong battles. Stop pretending you're not tired. Stop trying to carry it all by yourself. Let God strengthen you when you are weak, and let the right people hold up your arms. Because your marriage, your relationships, your friendships, your heart, and your future, they depend on it. And all those things are worth fighting for. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes?